Hi, my name is Daued, and thank you for welcoming me into your homes today. I'm very happy to see you again, and I hope you're happy to see me too. I hope you're having a good time already, and if you're not, then I promise you will have now. Because today, together, we're going to talk about something very important, something very amazing, something very useful, and something very interesting. I'm telling you, it's going to be so much fun and learning both at the same time, only if you promise to do a very simple thing. You need to pay attention. So please pay attention and listen carefully because that is the key, that is the secret to make everything super easy. Today, I would like to talk to you about Nelson Mandela's long walk to freedom. Okay? So before we start, I want you to repeat something after me, and trust me, it's gonna feel so good. Are you ready? Alright, here we go. It's a new, beautiful, peaceful, and positive day today. So I'm going to forget about all my worries and I'm going to enjoy this day. I hope you're feeling better now. So today we are talking about Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. It is an extract from his autobiography. Now, the question may arise in your mind, what is the difference between an autobiography and a biography? You see, when a person writes the story of his life himself, when a person writes the story of his life on his own, that is autobiography. Okay, for example, if Nelson Mandela has written the story of his life, which he certainly has, we will call it autobiography. Okay, but if you are writing the story of his life, or if I am writing the story of his life, it will be called a biography. Today we are talking about autobiography. Today we are talking about an autobiography, which is called Long Walk to Freedom. It is by Nelson Mandela himself. He has written this autobiography himself. So, God has told us in the Holy Scriptures to be kind. Yet, kindness is very rare to find. Nelson Mandela had to struggle a lot in his life just because the color of his skin was dark, just because the color of his skin was black. Apartheid was a policy in Africa and it lasted for very long. Whites, people with white skin, used to oppress people with black skin. People with white skin used to oppress people with dark skin, people with black skin. They used to treat them like animals. Their rights, their freedom was completely taken away from them. Nelson Mandela fought against this his entire life. And in this extract, we find the speech which he made when, by the grace of God, he became the president of South Africa. He became the president of the first ever non-racial democratic government of South Africa, and it was 10th May 1994 when he took his oath as the president of the country. So by the grace of God and his he had been working hard consistently for very long. He had been fighting against it all his life, and that day came on 10th May when he was finally victorious. So in his speech, he mentioned three most important things which I would like to discuss with you right now. Number one thing, he said that a human disaster that lasted too long. When he said that, he wanted to talk about the torture which by white people. White people used to torture black people, and it lasted for very long. Black people suffered, their sufferings lasted for very long. And it was indeed a human disaster when a community of people or a race of people or one kind of people like all these white peoples had made up their minds and they decided that they were going to be unjust, they were going to always be unjust and unkind towards all the black people. It was really a human disaster and it lasted for very long. And it was really, they were hurt, they suffered, they had to go through a lot of pain. So this was a human disaster. And then he says, from this human disaster, we are going to become a society which all humanity will be proud of. He meant to say that now there will be peace. There would be no more wars between blacks and whites. There would be no more fightings. And then he talks about that how it was the victory for peace, how it was the victory for justice. Now you may think, why was it the victory for justice? Why was it the victory for peace? You see, when a human being will stop being unfair to a fellow human being, it is a victory for justice. When a human being will stop being unkind and unjust to a fellow human being, it is a victory for justice. This is what had been happening there. Whites were unjust, unkind with their fellow human beings who were black in color, who had dark skin color. You see, colors are made by God, and all people are beautiful people. Blacks are beautiful, whites are beautiful. We all are beautiful people. We can beautify the world around us. You can beautify the world around you if you just beautify your view. This is something which I am saying. He didn't mention this in his speech. So we will get back to what he said in his speech. He said that it was a victory for justice. Indeed, it was a victory for justice, because now there would be no injustice anymore in the South African society, in the South African country, about color and all these things. And then he said it was a victory for peace. Why was it a victory for peace? How was it a victory for peace? Because when there would be no more wars, when there would be no more fightings, it was definitely a victory for peace. And it was a victory for human dignity. People will honor one another. A human being will respect the fellow human being. A human being will be compassionate towards another fellow human being. It is indeed, and it really was, a victory for justice, peace, and human dignity. And then in his speech, he goes on to say that never again on this land of South Africa, this will never be repeated. Never will this ever be repeated. That whites are oppressing black, or blacks are oppressing white. He said never. It will never happen again that blacks are being oppressed by whites, or whites are being oppressed by black. Such things will never take place on this land of Africa again, and God bless Africa. And then he goes on to talk about, he shares a lot of things in his autobiography. If you will read his autobiography on your own, you will find it. I'm telling you, you will find it very amazing, heart-touching. It will touch your heart. It will move your heart when you will read his autobiography. He goes on to share with us that how he misses all other people who fought for this day. He talks about Robert, Mr. Walter, Mr. Yusuf Daued, and Mr. Chief, and a lot of other people who from whom Nelson Mandela learned the true meaning of courage and wisdom. He says he wished that they were all there to see this day, that finally this day had come on 10th May 1994. And he says that it is not only me, it is not only a victory for me, it is a victory for all those who sacrificed, who made sacrifices, and we are able to reach here now. We have made it, we have come so far. And he says a very important thing, a thing which can change your perspective, your point of view, your nazariya, your opinion about so many human beings in the world, about so many human beings around you. He says that a goodness in a human being, listen very carefully, he says goodness in a human being is like a flame. It can be hidden, but it can never be extinguished. What a great thing he says. He says human beings have goodness in them. Each and every human being. We all of us, we all have goodness in our hearts. We can hide it, but we can never, remove it. We will always have. You have goodness in your heart. I have goodness in my heart. Everybody has goodness. All the human beings have goodness in their hearts. This is what Nelson Mandela says, and he is speaking from experience. When he was in prison, he used to see goodness in people who were there, people who were his companions, people who were not his companions, people who were there to torture them. Sometimes he would notice, observe a little bit of goodness in them. They would not let it appear on their face. They would try to hide it. They would prefer not to show it, but it was there. They could not remove it. And as he says, goodness in a human being is like a flame which can be hidden, but it can never be extinguished. And he says, no human being is born. What a great thing he says. He says, no human being is born with hate. It is true. Human beings learn how to hate. A person is never born with this feeling of hate. God hasn't given us this feeling. We develop this feeling. We learn this feeling, which is very bad. Never, 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 never should we ever develop this feeling in our heart. Hate is very bad. Okay? So he says that when a child is born, he's born hate-free. She's born hate-free. But then they learn hate, which is really bad. This is what he says in his autobiography, that human beings learn to hate, and this is something that we should avoid, we should keep away. We should not develop this bad quality. This is really a bad quality. And he talks about a lot of other things. And he, in this small extract, we will see a lot of things. In the end, he talks about that how the person who is being oppressed and the person who is doing it, they are both prisoners. How are they both prisoners? The person who is being oppressed, that person is suffering. That person has been taken away the freedom. That person has been taken away, all the rights have been taken away from that person. If we call that person a prisoner, that is fine. But how the person who is doing all this zulm, how the person who is doing all this oppression, how is that person a prisoner? Interestingly, Nelson Mandela says that he is behind the bars of hatred. He is a prison of this feeling of hatred, which is making him do all these things which he is doing. He's behind the bars of hatred and all these things. So he needs to get rid of hatred. Both are prisoners. The person who is suffering, the person who is being oppressed is a prisoner because all the rights have been taken away from him. The justice has been taken away from him. And the person who is oppressing is behind the bars. He is a prisoner. He's behind the bars of hatred. This is why he does all these things. So both of them need to get rid of this prison feeling. I would like to end this talk with a poetry of mine, which is called Just Say No to Hate. And it goes like this. If I see myself back in time, I would be very happy to see that swords are no more in use. But then I would be sad again, knowing that guns are invented. There have always been fightings, only the fighting styles and weapons have been changing. See what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki when atom bombs were invented. Hard is to fight, harder is to apologize, and the hardest is to forgive. I repeat, hard is to fight, harder is to apologize, and the hardest is to forgive. So just love, laugh, live, and stop blaming it to fate. Just say no to hate. Just say no to hate. Thank you. So through these lines of my poem, I say, it is very difficult to fight. When you are fighting with someone, it requires a lot of physical strength. It requires a lot of mental strength. It requires a lot of energy. And when it comes to apologize, hard is to fight, harder is to apologize. You need a lot of courage. You need a lot of guts. Sometimes you feel like, I don't want to say sorry to him. I don't want to say sorry to her. I'm feeling hesitated. I'm feeling a lot of hesitation. No, I can't do it. So it's a little difficult. It's a little more difficult for you to apologize. And the hardest part is to forgive. Oh, he did me wrong. Oh, she has done wrong to me. She did this to me. He did that to me. I will never forget that. I will never forgive that person. I will not be able to forgive that person. It's too difficult for me to forgive. So this is why in my poem, I'm saying that hard is to fight, harder is to apologize, and the hardest is to forgive. So just love, laugh, live, and stop blaming it to fate. Just say no to hate. Just say no to hate. So this is it for today. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you very soon again. I really enjoyed spending this time with you. Peace be with you. God bless you.